History shows, Elliot, well, first of all, history shows that no country stayed on top forever, 100, 200 years at the max, and then they peak and go into decline. So I presume we're no different from anybody else. But one of the problems with history is people don't learn the lessons of history. You know, we had a president recently who didn't know history, or if he did know history, he said he was smarter than history. I know I'm not smarter than history, and history is very clear. No nation and no currency, by the way, because they sometimes go hand in hand, has stayed on top forever. So America is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We have troops in over 100 countries. There are people who would say that we're overextended financially, economically, militarily, and it looks like they might be right. So yes, no, I worry. It's not a good time to be young in America, because what the young people are going to inherit is mind-boggling. I've got 2 teenage kids, and it disturbs me. It's good to be old because I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay for all of this. You know, I get the benefits. They're borrowing a lot of money, spending a lot of money. Pretty well, I'm old. Okay, do it. It helps me, but it doesn't help the future. 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number 2. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. Literally, the IMF had to fly into Heathrow to bail them out. So it can happen. It has happened. It often happens. And the symptoms, the money printing, the debt, etc., have always led to the problem, the kind of problems you're talking about. I don't think it'll happen in 2001 or 2021 or even 2022, but it's on the way. If you buy just about any country in the middle of a war, it goes straight up. Even if you bought Japan, if you were careful, you still came out making a lot of money, or Germany, even though both countries were destroyed. One of the things I have learned is if you buy in a catastrophe, you often make a lot of money. So I'm not advocating that we have a war so that we can all buy in wartime or anything. But your point is good. Yes, Britain was great. But the people who stayed in Britain didn't have a great life. Their standard of living compared to what it was before, it was not the same country. It's not the same world. It was amazing. I mean, I was actually a student in England in some of those years, and there were exchange controls. I can remember 20 years after the war, there were still sites in London that were known as bomb sites where the Germans had dropped bombs. 20 years later, they still hadn't cleaned them up. They didn't have any money, you know. Oh. So the standard of living was not great. You couldn't take money out of the country. I mean, it was a mess. That had been the richest country in the world.
Are we in the kind of period where the Federal Reserve just props up the stock market, and in local currency, it just goes up forever, and there's never really a big kind of correction? What are your thoughts?
Never a big correction? Oh, hallelujah, Elliot. Well, I've never seen that in history where things never go down. That would be fantastic. It certainly never happened in my investment career. I had plenty of mistakes and plenty of things go down. But your point is, basically, yes, my experience and my observation is that all of this money printing it has to go somewhere. It takes a long time to build a bridge or a factory, but it's very easy to go online and you buy as much of anything as you want. And that's what's happening. Everybody has a lot of money in their pocket. There is a lot of money around, and it's going into financial assets. Will that last forever? It never has, but you say maybe it will. Maybe it will this time.
Well, I don't think it will. I'm just looking at the Venezuelan stock market, and it's just straight up in their local currency.
At times in other currencies, it's gone straight up in local currency, but you can't buy a loaf of bread.
Right. So if it doesn't outpace inflation, and even if it underperforms inflation, then it's kind of worthless. I hear what you're saying.
Well, for history shows that it's very clear. There have certainly been periods when stock markets in various countries have done extremely well, but they didn't make people rich. What really counts is making people a lot of money in an international currency so that you can go and buy a watch or a car or a loaf of bread or whatever it is you want to buy.
So then my other question is kind of related to the current debate that's raging right now, which is the inflation due to supply chain disruption in the United States transitory, and will it just go away as soon as the big deflationary pressures like automation, globalization, immigration, all that keeping labor costs down, will the deflationary trends kind of supersede this potentially transitory inflation?
Well, Washington says that this is transitory. And, if you believe the head of the central bank and the head secretary of the treasury, then you don't have to worry. Everything is going to be great. Look out the window. Everything is going to be fantastic. No worries, no worries, no worries. I happen to be of a different view. First of all, the U.S. stock market has gone up, 10, 12 years without a serious problem, other than some short, gigantic disruptions, but nothing serious. That's never happened in American history. And maybe, Elliot, maybe it is different this time. Janet Yellen says, don't worry, we have solved the problems. We won't have problems, economic problems again. She's got degrees from 2 Ivy League universities, so maybe she knows what she's talking about. I happen to know she's wrong. We will have problems again, and when they come, it's going to be horrible. 2008, we had a problem because of too much debt. Elliot, since 2008, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed by gigantic amounts. So it would be my view that the next time we have a problem, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime, given that the debt is so, that may sound like some kind of wild statement, but look out the window. The debt is there. The debt goes higher every day. I know what it caused in 2008. It's got to be worse next time around. But Mrs. Yellen says, no, don't worry. It's not going to happen again. And Mr. Powell says the same thing.
Right, absolutely. So it's all in the government's books now, right? They've bailed out all the toxic debt, in the United States. So now it's on their balance sheet. Now they're going to have to deal with it. So how does this terrible event, the worst in your lifetime, kind of manifest itself? Is it that, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer? It's kind of interesting, right? How would it play out? Is it a hyperinflationary event where the cost of living goes up, no one can afford anything? How does that?
Well, hyperinflation eventually, of course, we may have hyperinflation. Britain ended with not hyper like Venezuela, but very serious, and the value of the currency went down 80% against the US dollar over a few decades. That's pretty serious stuff.